Harold B. Lee, the great author of many books, once said, "The most important work you will ever do will be within the walls of your own home." Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Live Life Largest discussion on mental health, its awareness and application. We welcome you all to the second episode of the series. Today, we will focus our talk on parenting for mental health with the help of subject matter experts Dr. Samson Gandhi, Executive Director of Person to Person, Dr. James Chacko, Founder and President of LifeBridge, and Samson Chalaya, Behavior Analyst from Transform Experiential Learning. With their insight, the best of biblical principles and social sciences undergirds our discussion. I'm Benita, and with my passion for psychology and journalism, I'm pleased to be hosting today's session. Welcome to the three of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Studies state that 1 out of every 5 children today has a diagnosable mental health condition. It is becoming increasingly clear that the origins of many mental health problems lie in their childhood. Family factors, including the quality of care that parents provide for their children, can make a huge difference to children's early life pathways, for better or for worse. If you're a parent or an aspiring parent, stay tuned to learn how to strengthen your child's mental health. Nurturing your child's mental health needs by creating a safe and positive home environment is today's necessity. In light of this need, let's begin our session with the first question directed to Dr. Samson Gandhi. These are high-tech, high-speed, and high-stress times. Life is further complicated by the generation gap between parents and youngsters. How can parents create a conducive environment for children so that they do not develop mental health problems? What are some of the do's and don'ts?
Many times we think that there is a complicated formula to have family peace, mental health, and enjoy life. But actually, these are age-old principles, very simple, very easy to follow. Number one, a family that enjoys mental health is one which worships God. We are all created to worship God. Therefore, when we worship God, we are aligned to the spiritual power and we receive the best from God. Second is where a husband loves his wife, because that's what, again, the Bible says. Husbands, love your wives, because it says, love your wife as Christ loves his church. So there's an order that is placed. The father and the mother in the home love each other. There's security all around. And somebody said, the best gift that a father can give to his children is to love their mother. And the third one is when parents nurture their children and bring them up in the fear of the Lord and to respect the elders. And all these three principles, if a family can follow with, when it is salted with laughter and peppered with dreams, I believe that family can enjoy a perfect mental health.
Dr. James, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Benita. I just want to echo the words of Dr. Samson that the spiritual values of the homes are probably the top in the list, on the top drawer of priority. There is an old adage that goes, a family that prays together stays together, and a family that loves one another. The focus on the Bible, which is the manual for living. We read in the book of Deuteronomy that as parents, we are to talk about the Word of God. We are to discuss and meditate on God's Word. The Bible says day and night. And that will create a wonderful atmosphere. But there are a few practical things like the use of technology in the high-speed stress times that we are living in. A few practical steps that we could take would be to balance the time between work and play and family time. And if one of them get lopsided, we ignore the importance of one, then we are going to pay a price. And so as fathers especially, we need to prioritize our work commitment, and those of you who are mothers who are working, making sure that you prioritize and balance quality time for the children, and then becoming a role model, like the father, like the son, like the mother, like the daughter. And so the saying goes. And so it's important that as parents, we are mentally healthy, we take care of our own feelings and make time to enjoy life. And the balance between all of the gadgets, the internet, the movies, gamings, and all of that needs to be well balanced. And I think, what you talk in front of your children at home also affects your children's mental health. And so the wife and husband needs to make sure that certain things of the serious family issues, such as financial crisis, marital problems, or physical illness, should not be discussed in the presence of the children while they are immature to understand all of that, and can cause a lot of worry, and the atmosphere can change. So there are some practical things added with the biblical and spiritual dynamics can create a beautiful environment in the house.
That's really wonderfully said. Samson, what is your understanding and perspective on this matter?
Yeah, I think Dr. Gandhi and Dr. James have really laid the foundation here and set that order in place, which is very, very important. Where the child also sees that there is a set pattern to the way how the family is functioning. Even when those arguments happen, even when those disputes do occur, at the end of the day, how do they make peace as a family? And I think that peacemaking process is very, very important. While children see their parents fight or have an argument, at the end of that whole situation, how do they come about if they have to apologize, or if they have to come and say, you know what, I'm sorry about, what I said. Maybe I should have thought it through. Maybe I should have asked you a few things before I reacted in that manner. And I think that's what helps children to understand, hey, you know what, they are also, having struggles like what I have. But the beautiful thing is they're setting a pattern where I can also find resolve in some of the challenges that I face. And I think that's a very clear environment where children can see, yes, there can be dispute, yes, there can be arguments, but yes, they can be resolved. And I think that really helps in creating that safe environment for children, knowing that there is resolve. And I think that's very, very important.
Setting a biblical pattern coupled with good practical steps to ensure that children grow up in a good mental health condition is very important. And moving on to our second question, societal pressures and peer pressure to conform are as real to parents as it is to youngsters. Do conflicts between parents and youngsters lead to mental health issues? How can they prevent and resolve such conflicts? Samson, we'd like to hear your view about this.
If you really look at how we are evolving as human beings, every generation is coming with an upgrade. And an upgrade comes with newer perspectives. And if you look at parents on the whole, when we talk about raising our children, we are talking about what are some of the things that we are translating and teaching our children. While on the other way, you can also see that we are also being taught parenting by our children as to how they prefer to be taught. And I think when we look at that whole societal aspect and the peer pressure that even parents and young people go through, because you are evolving and learning stage by stage. You can read as many books about parenting, but when the rubber hits the road, it's very different with your own child or with your own family as to how that kind of unfolds. If I'm having a certain pattern of habits and behavior which is very much visible, and my child see that, and they're kind of imitating those similar traits, telling them to stop doing that is not going to be of any good use. And I think managing those expectations and laying that very clearly is very, very important. If you're saying something, we also have to make sure that there is no indifference with the way of how we behave or how we act out, and expecting our own children to respond differently than how we are, because they're going to model our behavior, our habits.
That's a very valid point, actually, bringing your children to an understanding, leading by example, in behavior rather than in speech. That's actually very, very valid. I'd like to hear Dr. James's view on this.
Thank you, Benita. Definitely, the conflict is real, and the struggle between parents and youngsters are real in many homes. In my homes, that's the case because I'm a father to two beautiful children. My daughter is 24 and my son is 18. And conflicts do happen. Often that conflict are either between the mother and daughter and the father and the son. Often it is the same sex that conflicts. And from my experience, I discovered that usually the DNAs or the genes of the children are picked up in the opposite sex format as well. So when you have the same qualities and the same caliber of character and the nature in your children, there's possibility of the headbutts are more often. Prevent or resolve such conflicts. I want to focus on that because the reality of the struggle is there for everybody at different levels. The first thing that I have learned over the years, over the last 24 years, is never to lose your cool. And often the first thing we want to do is when we are in disagreement or they have done something wrong that deserves punishment, we resort to stick or belt immediately, and that can cause a lot of problem. And I think what I learned later in the years is to kind of step back from the situation without saying or do anything. Go and sit all by yourself for a few minutes, give some thought about what just happened, and then address the issue. And I have realized I'm able to make much better interaction with the child. So when your teenagers are acting stubborn and tough, be cool. Be a cool daddy, be a cool mother. The second thing I would say is to identify the real issue. What is the heart issue? What is the real issue where this fight have just happened? Often, I have seen in my own home, we end up fighting with each other, and then we look back and it's like onion is peeled. There's really no reason. There's nothing in the core of it. And so identifying the real issue to me is significant. And third one is to set realistic consequences. Remember, when you punish your child, it's good to tell your son or your daughter that what I'm about to do is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you. And I think just letting them know that they are important. Number 4 is acceptance, and that's very important, that we accept our children as they are and not put undue pressure on them to perform at levels which they are not meant to be or they are not created to be. And so accepting them as they are is also very significant, just loving them. And then number 5, and the most important thing, is that parents, both wife and husband, should put a united front in front of the children. If either one of them are behind the scenes talking against the father or against the mother, that is going to create division. And that's where we find a lot of children are taking sides with their parents. They like their mother over their father, or they like their father over their mother. And that is a very wrong practice. Number 6, and the final one that I want to share from my own experience, is to allow yourself to disengage. And that means there are times when your son or your daughter, you have done everything that you can humanly with the spiritual help, prayer, counseling, all of that. And if still your son or your daughter is wanting to be left alone at a certain age when they have become adults, in the case of my kids at this age, I'm quite happy to disengage. I'm quite happy to give them that space and let them figure out a few things on their own, and they will come back to the roots, provided I have already laid the solid foundations when they were younger. So I'm happy to step back and let them make some mistakes.
Those are really interesting but very practical points that you've actually put forward. I'm really glad to hear this, and I'm hoping that a lot of parents listening in will be able to understand and take away points from here. I would like Dr. Gandhi to come in with his perspective.
Yeah, pressure is very, very real, whether it is parental pressure on the children or the peer pressure on parents as well as children. That's why perhaps St. Paul made it very clear: do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Now, here I want to first put the parents on the spot. We always say youngsters experience peer pressure and they succumb to peer pressure. But actually, I believe parents are the first culprits when they succumb to the peer pressure. For example, I'll give you a true story of a wonderful lady who was a very senior doctor in a big government hospital. She retired though now. And one day she came and she insisted that her daughter goes to the medical college. She did not make it to medical college the first time. She did not make it through the medical entrance second time. Then my wife, who happens to know her, she said, "Auntie, why are you insisting that your daughter gets into medical college so much?" And she said, "Papa," that is daughter, "Papa, you don't know what I go through at the medical hospital. When we all sit together having lunch every other doctor has a story to tell about their son or a daughter, how they are faring, and each one of them is going to a different medical college, both in India and abroad. And I have no story to tell. How do I feel? So in other words, this lady, good intentions, but nevertheless, she was succumbing to the pressure around her, and she wanted to rub off her dreams on to her daughter. And I believe that's not fair. Now, many parents will turn around and say, then should we not aspire great things for children? Yes, please do. But you don't live your dreams through them, but let them have their own dreams. See what God has sent them this world into. Because the word of God says, train up a child in the way he should grow. When he grows up, he will not depart from it. And I believe that way is the way that God has put in each child. Let children come up with their dreams, and it is a parental responsibility to be able to nurture those dreams without succumbing to the pressure, societal pressure, peer pressure of the parents. Now, academics must not be a top priority. It is a channel, but that must not be a top priority. The mental health, the sense of well-being, that I'm unique, I have a dream, I am empowered by my parents to achieve it, that gives a sense of good mental health for a child. Now let's come to the second one, and that is the peer pressure on the youngsters, the pressure that they feel with their friends, with the media, so on and so forth. So here I would say again, parents can empower their children first and foremost by setting an example. Now, we don't want children to play on gadgets, have gadget time too much. So how are we? How much time are we spending with our cell phones? How much time are we on Facebook? How much time do we spend chatting away with our own friends with little, or no regard to other things? So children are observing, as Sam has said earlier on, we set an example. So we empower them to overcome peer pressure by setting an example, even in habits like gadgets, etc. Now, another way that we can empower them is, let's say, for example, youngsters really want to succumb to their peer pressure and buy expensive gadgets like a cell phone or a tablet or a laptop or anything like that. Now, a family may not be able to afford it. Now, how do parents empower them? I believe right from early childhood, if the children are told about the family's standard and budget everything, talk to them with their limitations and prepare them and give them life's experiences to enjoy rather than the temporary happiness that comes from possessing things. It goes into the ethos of the children, and that they can face the pressure from their friend. We can empower them, and they have to face their friend. So peer pressure and parental pressure must be taken care of, and mental health can be maintained. Remember, mental health is a byproduct. We don't chase mental health. When we follow God, when we follow His principles, mental health is a result of it.
Rightly said, mental health is a byproduct of our situations and how we learn to deal with them. Third question I'd like to ask is, psychologists and studies tell us that personality of a child is formed by the time they are 5 years old. How important are these formative years? What can parents do to prepare and ensure that a child grows mentally strong to face challenges of modern living? Do temperaments matter? I'd love to hear what Dr. Gandhi has to say.
Yes, I think it was a Russian psychologist who said, give me a child for 5 years and I will so shape his personality, and you can take him back and do whatever you want because he's not going to change. Now, we all are aware and becoming more and more aware that it is not only the first 5 years, but even from the time a child is conceived and as a child is growing in the womb of its mother, the personality is being shaped. And we know for a fact that in the Bible, when Mary visited Elizabeth, John the Baptist leaped with joy. And therefore, there is a connection between parents and children right from conception. The first formative years are very, very vital in determining the mental health of a child. Perhaps the Indian tradition, a pregnant mother goes to her mother's place so that she can be taken care of, pampered and everything. and give that kind of a good experience which she can pass on to the baby in her womb is beautiful. The father and the mother must be intentional about creating an environment right from early days. Probably sing to the baby, probably read to the baby, give the ideal touch, cajoling, hugging, kissing. Touch is such a wonderful thing. So early formative years are vital, and one of the things that happens today is parents are eager to put their children into play schools, nurseries, and etc. Too early, too early. I believe parents must know that children go through transitions. 0 to 5 is a crucial age. What is the role that parents have to play? We want to use a strong term, and that is control. Now, the word control is not in any sense like, taking a stick and things like that. But control, a good phrase is coined by James Dobson, and he wrote a book by this title, which says, Shaping the Behavior of a Child Without Breaking the Spirit. Now, when we train up a child, shape the behavior without breaking the spirit by harshness, by arbitrariness, then children know who is the boss. Now, remember very carefully here. There's something that is happening in the early years where a child must see parents as a visible expression of an invisible God. A child does not have a full understanding of God. A child must see a parent as a visible expression of an invisible God. In other words, when a parent says it should be a yes to the child, when a parent says no, it must be a no. So a parent can guide a child in good versus bad, in safe versus unsafe, and in right versus wrong. And when a child begins to respect the authority figure of the parents, he will develop a better understanding of God and all authority figures. Where do mental health problems come? When there are conflicts, when there are clashes. And these can be avoided when a parent controls a child in the early formative years. Then quickly, from 6 to 12 is the preteens. There, a parent must be a coach, helping a child to develop a skill set, develop an identity of who they are, what they are capable of, and develop a sense of well-being even with other friends and in family and society. 13 to 19 is crucial, and youngsters must relate to their parents, or parents must relate to their youngsters as counselors. Only for alliteration, I've used the word see, but then counselor, but otherwise they must be friends. They're adults now. So they must have communication, listening, more of listening than talking. And all the talking has been done during coaching, and all the behavior shaping has done in controlling 0 to 5. And lastly, from 20 plus, it is caring. So if parents can follow these, there is a tremendous amount of sense of well-being which can create a mental health.
That is said quite aptly. As a parent to a toddler, what has been your observation so far?
Very interesting, as a 3-year-old son of mine of late has been expressing some of his reasonable expectations. The other day he wanted to play with my phone, so I told him that no, he couldn't. And he turned around and looked at me and he said, Daddy, now Shalom is getting angry, and he made a face. and that's when I how children, he's just all about 3, are able to recognize some of the facial expressions that we as parents display. They pick up on these things. They learn so much from us in terms of how we parent them as we raise them. One of the things is the stages. My wife, whom I need to give a lot of credit to, has been very instrumental in telling me, as well as telling my son about some of the changes that he's been going through even as he is growing. And every stage, she's made a conscious effort to go ahead and identify what are some of those practical changes that you can get to experience. You can see some of those gradual growth patterns kind of shaping so beautifully. And I think the most important aspect that I have learned in raising my son, who's just about 3 now and going on, is how do we celebrate those small little successes that they have and celebrate with them with what they do right and help them with what they do wrong. I think they're able to see those gaps being bridged beautifully. Even as they get older, I think affirmation is another thing which is going to really going to help children as well as if they're teenagers or even if they are young adults. And so, yes, the formative years are very, very crucial.
That's a wonderful insight. I would like to also ask Dr. James to enlighten us with his perspective on this question. What can you tell us as a spiritual head of church and as a seasoned parent of kids in their late teens and young adulthood years? What can you bring to light?
Yes, that's a significant season in a child's life. I'm the oldest in the family, so looking back, now I know why I am the way I am. Parents are experimenting and learning some of the things that they should do right in the first attempt. And so we get it right often in the second attempt, because that 0 to 5 is a significant time you help the mental health of the child. Establishing certain values, core values from very early stages that are based on God's word, biblical values as core to the family's undergirding principles, and infusing that in every area was important. So let me share with you some of those core values that I see as very important for the formative years of a child. And number one is love. And when we're talking about this love, we're talking about the sacrificial love, the agape love of God. And we have in a Bible verse in 1 John chapter 4, verse 10, it says, "In this love, not that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his son to be propitiations for our sins." So God loved us while we were still sinners, and he gave us an unconditional love. And that unconditional sacrificial love needs to be imbibed in our family's atmosphere. And as parents, what we love is very important. Our children are constantly looking at what is it that we love. The people, the activities, the things that we are attached to, the children are watching. And that's where they're going to go. That's what they're going to chase. So if we love people as parents in the formative years, our children will also love other people. Second value is respect. Respect means that we recognize the best in people. The third one is intentionality for me. What are the things that are we going to allow our kids to be influencing? The cartoon, the choice of toys that we purchase. In our home, we make sure that our kids are not going to have any toys that are aggressive in nature. For example, guns and knives were not allowed in our house as toys. Our kids were never exposed to that. And another thing is boundaries and limits. There's a book written by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. The book is titled Boundaries. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, we read, "Let good things be kept in and bad things be thrown out." So being deliberate about boundaries is very significant for parents. Another value that I have wanted to put in my kids is the attitude of gratitude, training that from very young age. And Bible very clearly speaks about being thankful and having a heart of gratitude in our family. And another component is grace and forgiveness. We need to extend grace to our children. When they do a mistake, we need to be forgiving and letting them experience what grace means, what forgiveness means. And once they have experienced grace and forgiveness, they are able to extend that to others as they grow older. So these are some of the things that I really feel is very significant in the formative years, the values that parents should inculcate in their families' overall ethos, and that will hold the children to growing up into making good decisions and mature, responsible citizens in the society.
Those are all really wonderful points. Moving on to the next question, what I want to ask is, what are some of the early indications of mental health problems in children? What parents do to address such situations? Should they be taken to a psychologist or a counselor? Samson, with your background in behavioral psychology and a passion to work among young adults struggling with issues such as addiction, what has been your observation with regard to early indications of mental health problems?
Anything which you address at the early stage is always a better way to start. Because when the damage is done, it's a lot of firefighting that goes on, and it's very painful for the person who is going through it, and as well as for the counselor or psychologist to take them through that whole process. So yes, I would say the earliest you get down to the bottom of it, you will be able to help people to come out of that whole situation much earlier than at doing it at a later stage or somewhere in the mid stage.
Dr. Gandhi, what is your insight into the early indication of mental health? How can parents address such situations? And when, if they go to a counselor, when is the right time to take a child to a counselor? Like, also, would you recommend that children be taken to a counselor just as they are taken to a general physician every couple of months or for an annual checkup? What are your views?
I can't agree more with Samson Chalaya. Whenever you see emotional problem, a mood disorder, it's important for parents to address it at the earliest. For example, some of the signs that a parent can be aware of in order to see whether there is a mental health issue are the following things. First and foremost, see if the child has become moody, meaning a child that is otherwise exuberant, playful, happy, suddenly becoming withdrawn and unhappy, there's definitely something wrong. Secondly, if there is a disturbance in the sleep patterns, either they're sleeping too much or unable to fall asleep like they did before and wake for a long time and then waking up late. A third one is a loss of appetite. I don't feel like eating, I am not interested. Another point to note is a loss of interest in life. When a child perhaps is happy to play outside or on gadgets, suddenly says, I'm not interested. Another sign you need to look at is, and otherwise doing well in studies and academics, suddenly the grades are falling. When child experiences nightmares, these are quite a few things that a parent must look out for. Now, there are normal situations when a child goes through these for temporary moments, 1 or 2 days. Then that's not a problem at all. They bounce back and, something may have happened. They must have had a fight with their close friend. They're moody and then they patch up, then they're all right. But medical experts tell us that if 3 or more of these symptoms persist for more than 2 weeks, that is a good time, a very apt time to take proper medical consultation. Now, you don't have to go straight away to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. You may go to your family doctor, a general physician, and explain these things and your apprehension that the child may need the attention of a health professional, mental health professional, and let the physician direct you whether the child needs a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And if you know anybody within your family circles, then consult them. Now, let me just quickly allay fears of parents on this whole issue of receiving help for children or for yourself. Now, I want to encourage, like Samson Chalaya has said, I want to encourage parents to not add any stigma for any kind of intervention, call it treatment, that you might want to receive from a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Just as when something is wrong with your body, you go to a medical doctor. When you need attention at a mental level, you go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So please do not add a stigma. You need attention, and if you neglect it, it can precipitate matters and things are harder to correct later on.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Dr. James, I would like to ask you, how can the church help parents when there's an early indication of mental health problems in children?
Yes, thank you, Benita. We will be addressing specifically the role of the church, the government, and so forth in our next episode. But to say in general terms, first and foremost, that we seek God about the crisis, because God is our greatest physician. He is able to deal with every aspects of our ailments, and that includes a mental health disorder. As I have studied the early childhood mental health issues, there are 3 basic mental disorders that have been analyzed. And the first one is anxiety disorders, and the second one is depression, and the third one is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. These are 3 main categories of mental disorders, and Dr. Samson Gandhi have narrated in detail the symptoms that we can watch out and look out for. And we need to really understand whether any of these mental disorders, we need to diagnose whether they're physical in nature that requires medical treatment, or whether there is a mental issue, whether it's a mind related issue that requires therapy and counseling, or it is a spiritual issue where it requires prayer, counseling, and even deliverance. And so, regardless of what categories it falls, God is the overarching healer of it all, and parents should never neglect this matter. We must seek help. We should talk to a specialist. I would say begin the conversation with your child's pediatric doctor. I think that will be the first place to have the conversation. Your child's doctor is a qualified doctor. He will be able to give you the first guidance as to even whom to go and talk to about these matters. So there are effective medications available. There are educational or even occupational interventions and therapies that are available, physiotherapies that are available, and most pastors, all of God's servants, are equipped spiritually and biblically to pray and counsel. So seek the help of the pastor. Go to your pastor and say, look, my son needs help. Can you pray for him? Can you counsel him? Or can you even guide in any way? And so do seek help. There is help out there for parents to deal with this. Do not sit back on this issue.
Can I add a point to that, Benita? The modern day parents and youngsters, when they have a question, they immediately go to Google. Google research is good for many aspects. But when it comes to health, and particularly mental health, many people are doing research and diagnosing themselves and suffering a lot. And added to that, they carry that stigma. And then later on, after a long time, they go to a doctor and say, I have this problem, I have that problem, I'm depressed, and I have schizophrenia and all that. But please do not indulge in it. If you are having any distress mentally, go to a doctor, let him or her diagnose you, and make appropriate interventions.
I believe that's surmount importance, as Dr. Gandhi said, that you don't diagnose yourself, or rather also stigmatize the whole situation. Parents, please seek help when it's needed. Another major question that holds relevance and importance today is that traditional parenting is giving way to equal parenting, where both father and mother have a say. Is this helpful for the mental health of the youngsters? Are there specific roles for parents that can help create emotional well-being for youngsters? Dr. James, what has been your observation with regard to parenting, and what would you like parents tuning in today to know?
Yes, I believe, from God's design of family, it is meant to be both father and mother raising the child. It is not designed by God for a single mother or a single parent to be raising the children. And there is no replacement or substitute for the role of a male father and a female mother in the cognitive and every aspects of the growth of the child's overall makeup. And so let me establish that as the biblical God's design for parenting and parenthood. And it is, yes, it's equal parenting with a very unique gift mix coming together to complement one another. And so in my home, I don't say that this must be the case for everybody, that we have decided that my wife would resign her job and pay more attention to the child and the overall growth of the children when they were in the early years of their birth and their growth stages. Because as a father, as the breadwinner of the family, we have to travel, we have to move out. And so it is very important that at least one parent is paying close attention to the child's growth, especially in today's society where both parents are working. If possible, if you can make the sacrifices, it is worth every sacrifice that the mother stay home in the early years to take care of the child. Father cannot replace a mother's role. A mother cannot replace a father's role. The mother is, to me, is the first teacher. The mother, to me, is the first friend. The mother is the first role model. And the mother is the one who instill unconditional love and all the core values that I shared earlier, first and foremost to the child. And so that everybody understand, and I think everybody embraces that value and the significance of the mother undoubtedly. So let me focus a little bit on the father's crucial role, and I think this is very important in the cognitive, social, and emotional development of our children. An involved father is one who is engaged, one who is available, and one who is responsible. Children are much more socially and emotionally developed in a full sense to face and tackle the challenges of the world when fathers are involved. Mothers prepare the children for the home, and fathers prepare the children for the world. And I think that's God's way of families to be raising their children.
It's actually a perfect answer. Being involved in a teamwork. As a youngster yourself, Samson, what is your take on parenting roles?
There has been a time where when I've had disagreements with my own parents, I've had these blatant statements that I've made saying, well, when I grow up to be, who I am, and when I have my own kids, I won't be a parent like you. I won't behave the way you behave. And interestingly so, I've noticed, even as I've become a parent now, I realize that some of those aspects of what I've learned in that traditional lineage of parenting is kind of translating in my own attitudes and behavior as well. There are some amazing values which you cannot ignore. So we should not kind of outdate it by saying, okay, it's from a different generation, because at the end of the day, we have to deal with the issue at hand. And now the other aspect, when we talk about the equal parenting responsibility of both husband and wife, father and mother, children, no matter how small they are, they're able to go ahead and manipulate the situation because they know what they can get done from which parent. Like my son is just all about 3 years old. If he wants to go outside and if he wants to go for a spin in the car, he knows that he needs to come to dad. Or if he wants something to play with or something that he likes to eat, he knows where to go. He goes to his mom. And so children are very smart in understanding at very early stages of meeting their demands and needs as to who can provide between the two. But here's the most important thing. While that is good to a certain extent, but children can also end up manipulating the parents and making them in a situation where an argument or a disagreement can be birthed because of how they want to get things their way. Like, for example, if I'm going to say no to something that he would want, and if my wife is going to say yes, and if there is a bit of an imbalance between the two and not agreement between the two, the tendency is to get things done, they will go ahead and push from the side where they can get approval of. And so those are some important dangers which we need to understand. If we are in good communication with each other and just cross-verify, saying, hey, you know what, our son just came and asked us about this, and apparently he said that you're okay with it. And just that one phone call or three that's being asked between the husband and wife resolves a lot of issues which can become a triangular problem.
Thank you, Samson, for your response. I'd like to ask Dr. Gandhi, our listeners would like to know what your view on this point is.
Equal parenting is a very interesting term. Now, traditionally, there were very, very clearly delineated roles. A father was going out, earning, and keeping the family going. But whereas the mother was nurturing the children and keeping the home. Now, the modern day living, and we have huge dilemmas. One is both parents it's becoming necessary to work. I appreciate Dr. Chaco and his family taking the decision, but how many parents can really afford it? And he very graciously said, each family must make their own decision. So both parents tend to work, and then quite often father travels, leaving the mother with the children to take care and work and look after, so on and so forth. And the current situation is that there are night shifts, both for fathers and mothers. And worst of all, there are cross shifts where the father works night and mother works day, and they hardly are able to be together. And that's another dilemma. And then we have the whole aspect of foreign posting. And sometimes families, the father is in another country for 2 years. These are challenging situations for parents to have that ideal traditional parenting model. Now, since we are not there, the equal parenting comes into picture. Say, if the father and mother work cross shifts, who's going to look after the children? There was a time when mother used to look after the infant all the time because she was there. But now the father probably has to change the nappies, may have to prepare the feed and feed the little one. Now, if this is not adapted to, then there are mental health issues both for parents and for children. So every family must develop their own unique way of running their home and change their role definition as parents, and then arrive at, call it equal parenting or workable parenting, and make the family work and develop a good emotional health for the family. While we have practically different roles for parents to play, the traditional biblical model of father taking the leadership role, the mother, the facilitator role, and children, the participating obediently and respectfully, that would be the model for any family to play the right roles and have good, peaceful environment at home.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for your response. Due to time constraints and the vastness of the topic that we are discussing, we're going to wrap up our session here with a surprise question. As parents, would you like to take this moment to share one last piece of advice to new parents or aspiring parents? Something you wish you'd have known before beginning your parenting journey. Let's start with Dr. James.
Well, for me, had I known better, I think I would have spent more time with my family and with my children, especially. I would have loved to have made more memories, more things that they will remember for the rest of their lives. Children are with us for 15 to 17 years maximum these days, and making the best of those 17 years is very important. And I don't think I have done justice to that, and I wish I would have done better.
Are you really being teary-eyed right now? Let's hear from Dr. Gandhi as the seasoned parent and senior of the entire panelists.
I distinctly recall a time when I came from a 3 weeks trip from the Northeast, Nagaland. So I had to make a 3-day train journey and be there for 2 weeks and come back 3-day journey. No phones. The first thing we looked for was PCO to do the customary calls. So 3 weeks away from home, and here we have 3 young children growing up. And my son Michael was probably in 8th or 9th standard. And when I returned from such a 3-week trip, I tried to correct him in something. And he gave me such a look, and it just came to me that he was saying, "Papa, you're gone for 3 weeks, and how can you have a right to come and check me when you were not here all these 3 weeks?" And that is the time I made a conscious decision that I'm going to cut down on my travel and spend more time and earn my right to intervene in the lives of children and shape them. And I would say the same thing to every young parent. It is not worth it to sacrifice family time for anything, your career or even for ministry. Mind you, when I was going to Nagaland, I was on a ministry trip. So God has not put ministry above family. Please keep this in mind. Otherwise, I would coin this phrase, what does it profiteth to gain all the church and lose your own family?
That is quite beautifully put. I would like to hear what Samson would like to say about this.
I think I'm learning quite a lot, even as I'm having the privilege of sharing the platform with Dr. Gandhi and Dr. James. So I would say that I have some grace over here, as my son is just all about 3. But if I were to look back, and I can really sense during my travels and my extensive moving around, I've realized that even as small as he is, my son has expressed him missing me when I've been away for long periods of time. I think, at the early stages, this is something which I can curate to make sure that I'm not away from him and I don't miss out on those crucial years of his growing up stages.
With that, we've come to the end of this panel discussion, but I would like Dr. Gandhi to actually summarize and tell us what this panel discussion entailed for us.
Parenting is a very enjoyable calling, but it is also a serious business. I don't know how many years you were trained at colleges and in your profession, and you have become efficient. But when it comes to parenting, there is no training available. Therefore, it is all the more important to be able to gain through shows like this by reading books and by waiting on the Lord. So, I believe that mental health is a very, very important thing that you need to look for and you need to work for. And I believe that you must prioritize your relationship with God and prioritize thereafter your family over everything else. Now, as parents, we need to look at children as a gift from the Lord, as an amazing opportunity to discover their latent talents and help them to realize their own dreams and not succumb to any pressure, personal or peer. Then we need to be aware that if we as parents are not exemplary in our own relationships and walks, we would develop conflicts with children and it can disturb the mental health of the children. And therefore, we need to be intentional about practicing mental health at home. There is always a chance that children may develop mental health issues. Do not worry, do not fear. There is always a professional intervention available. Prayerfully seek consultation as to what needs to be done if you notice those signs that we talked about in children. And last but not the least, remember, you are very precious for your children. And when they see a joyous face, they resonate with that joy and they become joyful children. You be joyful and be infectious to your children, and mental health is an automatic byproduct.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for that recapitulation of the entire panel discussion for parenting, for mental health. Coming next week, we'll venture into the world of mental health and the role of policymakers. Until then, we hope you stay safe. Take a moment to let today's discussion sink in and introspect your own parenting journey and make changes where it's needed. Celebrate your journey as parents, your children, and your family experience. And if you're suffering with any mental health issues as a parent or have children going through mental health issues, feel free to reach out to us on the contact information given on our social media handles and we will get in touch with you. Have a blessed week ahead. Goodbye.